Hey everyone, how you doing? This is Coffee Chug, and what we thought we would do is bring in an actual teacher example to your creativity thinking challenge in terms of creating your own Lego selfie. I happen to be married to an amazing educator, and I know I'm somewhat biased because she's my wife, but she is, and she has actually used this particular project in her classroom. So, Amanda, why don't you introduce yourself and explain what it is that you teach?
I'm Amanda Maurer. I have been teaching for 18 years. I teach eighth grade algebra, which is the upper level math course in our building. And I also have two sections of the co taught pre algebra, which are the kids who struggle with math a little bit, and we have an additional teacher in the classroom.
So for this Lego selfie challenge, I know many of you are probably a little nervous going, oh my gosh, the very first creative challenge, he's asked me to actually build a model of myself that represents me. And I know that can always be a little challenging to kind of look inward and then to be brave enough and bold enough to then share that build out for others to see. And so, as always, we have to be models for what we want with our students. But in this case, I do want to share her journey of using Lego for creating a selfie wall, a selfie portrait for the students. And so, could you kind of explain how that came to be and kind of how this idea developed?
So this was used at the beginning of the school year when you have 150 students that you work with that you have only known for a couple of days. But we all know how we go do the activities or the lessons where we ask them to introduce themselves and tell us about yourself. Well, we've only known each other a few days, but yet we're asking these kids to share these things about themselves. And it always created a sense of awkwardness that I didn't like. I didn't want that culture in my classroom right away. So I was trying to come up with another way to learn about the kids to show, I do care about you. I want to hear about you, but I don't want the awkwardness. So we came up with this idea. And all I did was ask them to build something with the Legos that they were given that tells about themselves.
And so, how did that work? Because I know we had lots of conversations about the idea of the kids themselves. Your original plan was actually take a picture of them all, and not every kid was on board. And here we were thinking that in this selfie culture, in this day and age of social media, that they would jump on board, and that wasn't the case. And so, could you talk about that, and then how they bridged into the idea of embracing the Lego model?
Yeah, so I was like, oh, you guys, I'm going to bring in all these props. We're going to do like this selfie station. You can take pictures of yourselves. And they were like, no, we don't want to do that. And I think it goes back to they weren't comfortable with the culture of the classroom yet. They were not trusting of everybody around them, they weren't trusting of me as a teacher. So I said, okay, so if we didn't do that, what's another thing that we could do? Because I was trying to give them student voice, something that I want in my classroom. And I felt I needed to introduce that right away at the beginning of the year. So brainstorming with the kids, I was like, well, I have all these Legos. Like, what if we did something with that? And they're like, oh, that'd be cool. We would do that. And so I asked, excuse me, would you want me to take a picture of you with your Lego building? No, they did not want to be in it. So I was like, okay, so we're on to something. So then that's when this came up that they would build something to explain themselves, and I would only take a picture of what they built. So the focus wasn't on them physically.
So the kids went through and they built their Lego models, and then you went. We took pictures of them all. You printed them all off, and you put them on your display board, as people can see here on the website. And I think the most important thing that came, once again from our conversations was talk a little bit about some of your aha moments in the sense that I remember us talking about how you felt like the kids shared more about themselves than they ever would have had we just taken a regular selfie picture and put their face on the wall. These Lego builds and models, they really gave us a deep insight, not us, I should say you, a deep insight into who they were because they really took some time to really think carefully about which pieces and what they wanted to represent about themselves.
Yeah, so envision this. So we created this green screen with the two base plates back in the corner of my classroom. So while other kids were building, I would have kids come back to the little area where I had the green screen set up if they were ready, and then I would take the picture of what they made. And while I was doing the picture, they were explaining to me what it meant. So again, the focus was not me looking at them, but instead I was looking at what it was that they created. So I took the picture and then they would continue to talk, and I was simply looking at their build rather than them. And I felt that that really allowed them to open up and not feel the pressure.
And so I know there was, for me, I remember as we were combing through all these pictures and doing what educators do. If you happen to be married to an educator, you debrief every single day together. And I remember there was the one that you were talking about, and I'll show it here on the screen for you to take a look at, that I think paints a perfect picture to so much of what we do when we talk about hands-on learning, that from an educator perspective, it's very important that we don't put our own interpretation into a build until we allow the students to share. And I remember we were talking about this particular one that you guys are looking at, in which it's, if you look at it without explanation, it kind of looks a bit startling. So talk about this one, because this is the one. I mean, there are tons of amazing builds, but this is the one that still resonates with me. From all these months later, from our educator conversations that we have each day.
So keeping in mind that this was done at the end of our first week, so I had had about 4 days with the kids already, and I had recognized that this was a pretty quiet girl. She'd kind of kept to herself those first 4 days. And so when she put this up on the green screen area, I was like, what's she going to share here? And she ended up talking about how these two things represent basically what she feels all the time. And that is stress and anxiety on one side and family and school on the other side, and how she's always being pulled back and forth between them. And she had other explanations of all the different parts of it. But I think I never would have gotten that out of her in the first week of school had we just done the typical, go through, tell us something about yourself. So that to me was like, wow, this is pretty powerful.
Yeah, and if you look at it, my first interpretation was, oh, she's going to be beheading some minifigs here with these hatchets that she has in her head, in her hand, and in the picture you can see. But yet it's so much more profound and inspiring, and it really offered that relationship and creating that safe space. And so as we kind of wrap this up to a close, is there anything else that kind of comes to light that as educators listening to this and they're going through their own journey, and then maybe even thinking about using it within their own classroom, any advice or thoughts or other ideas that you want to bring to the table?
Yeah, I think as educators, we always try to find something that withstands the school year. Like, for example, I always talk to my students like, I want to talk the talk, but I also want to walk the walk. And so how can I show that to them? So this was an example of that. Like, I truly care about you and I want to hear about you. So I think that's one thing. The second thing is when I put these up on the bulletin board, these are 8th graders at the beginning of the year who are trying to be cool and show their status. Every single class, the bulletin board was surrounded by all the kids looking at other people's creations. So I think that's very telling. And another thing about it is it does withstand the school year, because just the other day I had a group of like 5 or 6 kids looking at that same bulletin board, trying to talk about like, what do you think this one means? I wonder whose this is. I mean, had I put a bulletin board up there of, for example, my habits of mind and interaction, that's not going to draw 5 or 6 kids in the month of April to go over and look at it and talk about it. So to me, that says the power in that.
And something as you were just talking that we haven't talked about ahead of time, but is now would be interesting to like giving them those same pieces again. And how would they build a model of themselves, and almost kind of comparing and contrasting their growth over the course of an 8th grade year? Because anybody who works in middle school, it's true for any age, I shouldn't just say middle school, the amount of growth that kids develop. And so as they're walking by those boards, it would be kind of fascinating to see how would you interpret yourself again, and then what did you build at the beginning of the year, and what do you see differently? What do you see the same? Kind of for some of their own kind of personal growth journey.
Also, I would be curious if I did ask them to do the original selfie, like I had asked them at the very beginning of the school year. I wonder if they'd be more apt to do that at the end of the school year. That would, to me, would be a measuring tool for myself of, did I create the culture that I envisioned in my classroom, that this is a safe place and we're all in this together? So I would be curious, yes, to have them, 1, do that again, but 2, would you be willing to do that if I set up a selfie station? So
yeah. Lots of great questions and thoughts and ideas, and so hopefully this little tidbit, this example, is proof to the pudding that there can be some real powers. So go for it, grab your Legos, make your own Lego selfie, be brave, be bold, and share, and let's make it happen. Amanda, thanks you so much for sharing.
No problem.